right, let's get started. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's a great turnout. Before I start, turn off your noise-making devices, and don't forget to fill out your evaluations. Hi, everyone. My name is Derek Lieu, and this is Make the Trailer Before the Game, a marketing-first way to prototype. So my whole goal here is just to help you make more marketable games and for you to be more confident that you have a marketable game before you're just neck-deep in production. So tell me if this sounds familiar. You can just nod. You're just about finished with your game. You've put in a lot of work, and you realize you need to make a trailer. And you're like, oh, what do I show? What do I put in my trailer? Which this is a terrible feeling to have, because the less clear your answer in that moment, the less marketable your game probably is. I mean, it's also hard to just work on your own project, too, but still. This is also really bad to discover late in production. Certainly there's some games where, yeah, they know what to show. It's Untitled Goose Game. You just got to show the goose being horrible. Or Thirsty Suitors, like everything about this game looks different because of its characters and its setting, the animation. Everything stands out. Or like Papers, Please. You have this game, it's just so singular, this thing that's never existed before, and it's all about stamping passports. So you kind of can't help but show the thing that makes it look exciting. But for a lot of games, their defining features are not immediately apparent. This is my sister-in-law's dog. She sends these pictures sometimes and says, which side is which? All right, is the head on the left side or the right side? Cheer for left. Cheer for right. Anyway, that's an aside. So yeah, a lot of games, their defining feature is not really apparent. Or they're just kind of outside the norm, because maybe they combine two things that maybe you're not even sure if they should go together, but you've done it anyway. In a lot of cases, you're just iterating on a popular genre, like Metroidvania, Legend of Zelda, Cozy Life Sim, City Builder, Roguelike. So a lot of times the answer isn't really clear. And also, if your game is iterating on an existing genre or genres, it's super easy to make a 90-second trailer that just never shows what's unique about your game. Just like getting to the basics of gameplay. It's really easy to do and kind of scary. So, but wouldn't it be great if you just knew what should go into your trailer in advance and you're confident that your game is more marketable? Which also, by the way, again, my name's Derek Lieu. I've worked on a lot of game trailers. These are just a few of them. I've been doing this for 8+ years, and I think a lot about what games need to do to show off their unique selling points. OK, so usually this is like a gross oversimplification of how this goes. Make the game, make the trailer. But what if, which I know technically it's more like this. You're making the game, and then at some point along the way, you're like, crap, I need to make a trailer. And that's more how it works. But that's just me being pedantic. Anyway, I came up with the idea for this talk because there's an interview with Lucas Pope on NoClip where he was talking about how when he thinks of game ideas, he thinks about the trailer first. And he says if he's prototyping, and if he can't imagine right now a cool trailer for this, it's probably not worth pursuing, which this is just the way he works. And I also interviewed him for this talk, as well as a bunch of the developers from these games, because they've either done something similar, where they think about the trailer very early, or made videos to kind of help them through production, or at least just thought of it. So why think of it when you're prototyping? Well, because first of all, trailer, essential marketing asset. Of course, I'd say that. Shows what your game looks like, quickly shows the experience of your game, communicates your game's vibe, shows your game's unique and similar qualities to other games, and it gets people interested and or excited, at least hopefully. And so when you're making a prototype, you're trying to brainstorm ideas, determine the experience/fantasy of the game, whether, I don't know, you're a cat rescuer or something like that. Find the mood and tone, establish the themes, design the steps in the game's loop, look at the marketability of the idea, get buy-in from yourself, the team, and money people, and research genre viability, which what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bold all the things that a trailer will help you to do, which you probably thought it was going to be all of them, but I don't think it helps research genre viability. But everything else, it can really help you with. So another thing Lucas said was, when he's thinking of ideas, is can I pitch this game without comparing it to other games or letting someone play it for a couple of hours, which gets to this key point that game prototypes have some weaknesses. A lot of times they can just be like a bunch of mechanics, sort of things that don't necessarily cohere. They can be very rough and unpolished, and it can take a long time to explain what makes them good. You know, some things only really work when you combine all the things together, and if you need to take that much time, that means that it's going to be harder to compress into a trailer and therefore harder to just pitch. So as an example, two very good games. We have Unsighted and Untitled Goose Game, which I haven't played Unsighted. It's a very, very good game, one of my favorites from recent years. So the things that make this game good are, as Metroidvania, Legend of Zelda design, nonlinear dungeon order, post-apocalyptic world, weapon variety, tight controls, parry system, secrets, pets, and there's a lot more. And then Untitled Goose Game, of course, the pitch is you're a horrible goose. You know, these are both great games, but you can see why one's just easier to market overall. Not saying Unsighted shouldn't exist. It's a great game. It's just, I could see why it'd be hard to market. So a trailer forces you to ask, what does this game look like when it's being played? Which is really, it seems like a small distinction between just like what does the game look like versus what does it look like when it's being played. But like it's also really easy to make a trailer where you have no idea how it plays. You just have like a bunch of camera movements through the environment. And you're like, what's actually the game? It also forces you to ask, how quickly can we show this game's unique selling points? What audio and visuals will convey the game's story? And how will this game look different from its inspirations? And Eka from Outer Loop Games said just so much of making a game is trying to sell the idea. You're trying to get people to buy in before they play. And so as an example, not all games can be easily described with words. So here's two excerpts from reviews for Viewfinder. Viewfinder is a first-person puzzle game that tasks you with placing photographs over existing geography to modify your terrain, allowing you to reach the stage's exit. If you play Viewfinder, that's pretty accurate, but not very evocative. Or this is a world where you can bring photos to life. The 2D image becoming a 3D reality when you place it within the puzzle world. Even still, it's a little bit hard to conjure images. So like here's a screenshot, which even then doesn't 100% get it across. So like here's a really early video that they released. So the Viewfinder team, they spent 6 months making a prototype with the idea of making it into a trailer or a video montage. And they did this because this game has to be seen to be understood. And also puzzle games are not super popular, so they needed a really strong way to pitch. So that's why they really focused on getting this whole thing together. Because the trailer boils down the game and explains it visually. This is the trailer I did for Noita. And it's also a good tool to use when prototyping, because a trailer concept is a cheap framework to brainstorm ideas. This is a screenshot of an animatic I did for an Among Us trailer, just in my office, filming on my iPhone. And I have this quote from Jeff from Mediatonic. He says, a trailer is a short-circuit way to think of the end product instead of getting bogged down in details, features, and mechanics. And it really just forces you to think of the emotion or the holistic experience. And another reason it can be good to think about early is because the core themes and premise can be gameplay agnostic. I mean, it depends on your game. But so Eka from Outer Loop Games was saying that the themes of Thirsty Suitors were always the same, but the gameplay went through a lot of changes. So having this sort of core to it helped things along the way. And also describing a game based off its features, not super interesting. This is just a trailer I made for Firewatch as an example of just the worst possible way to sell Firewatch. And it's based off of trailers that I've watched. I'm a little bit silly here, but there are a lot of games that just kind of point out features, and it's not the best way to sell a game, especially with Firewatch. So here's an example. So we have Songs of Glimmerwick, which has a lot of moments which feel the same as other games, or superficially. Every game is like this. They have parts of their game that look like other games. So here we just have like character walking through the environment or farming. And this part here doesn't look like super marketable, even though the art is nice. But this trailer actually opens with this shot. And they did this to hook the audience. They created this moment for the trailer, and they added it to the game later on. It did not exist before they were like, crap, we need to make a trailer and find a way to make it hooky. So if you start off with this, and then you show the stuff from before, way more interesting. Because the trailer helps you make standout moments. You don't want people to watch your game trailer or look at your game and just think like, oh, I've kind of seen this before, but the art style is different. You want them to have at least a few things that make it memorable and unique. And so yeah, Daniel from Eastshade said, I think making trailers is conducive to making memorable quests. You guarantee you have at least one great set-piece moment in the game. And so here are more things that a trailer can reveal about your game. Does the art style stand out? How visual are the game's hooks? How does the game visually tell the story? Is this interesting enough to hook an audience? And how difficult is it to understand when watching but not playing? Because the worst case scenario is just art doesn't stand out, hooks aren't visible, story isn't told visually, and it's difficult to understand the gameplay. Now, right now, some of you are probably thinking, but Derek, I want to make my game, which is not very visual, has really strong gameplay, and I get it. But this exercise is still worth doing, because if you have one of those games which is not like super trailerable, thinking about this early would force you to think of maybe some solutions that might make your job a little bit easier by the time it comes to market your game. Instead of just like thinking like, there's all these things that the player does in the game that when it happens, you can't really tell that it was the player causing it. That's not a good feeling to have when you have to make visuals for a trailer. Because when you're watching a trailer, or people are watching a trailer, they're looking for on-screen feedback, which reflects the player's actions. And you can build that in while making the game. And so this is why the lens of a trailer is a great tool, because you just have to pick and choose or create the images which will anchor your game in a space that's familiar and show enough of its hooks or unique selling points to make it look worth playing. So it's really the difference between just like having a bunch of mechanics and a bunch of mechanics which have visuals that correspond to them. Okay, so here are a few ways that a trailer will help development. First is that it sells the game to you, the team, the investors, aligns the team around a common goal, establishes themes, story, mood, and tone, makes you think of the game's visuals and readability, and I'll go down each of these one by one. So first is sell the game. It sounds like something you have to do last, but actually you have to do it first. And Lucas gave me this really good point, which was just that games are so terrible for so long that it helps to have a vision of the finished game. Sell it to yourself, and then you probably also have to sell it to people who will give you money to let you develop the game. But selling it to yourself is really important, so then that you can stay sane when it's broken for 2 or 3 years or something. And so aligning the team around a common goal. So the example I have here is for Transistor, which is Supergiant Games' second game. So after Bastion, they had a lot of trouble working on Transistor. They were just floundering, trying to figure out what they were making. They liked their basic setting, but the other things like the protagonist just weren't clicking. The atmosphere, the story, and the premise were all just up in the air. And so the problem was that just didn't feel what they had, and they weren't really excited. And Greg told me when I interviewed him, he said, just if you're not excited at the start, it's not great to assume you're going to get excited later. It's a big gamble. And so meanwhile, engineers were experimenting with gameplay mechanics of this like mix of turn-based and real-time action, but they didn't really have a game to fit it into. And so Darren Korb, their composer and audio director, suggested they make a tone video, since they couldn't make a vertical slice. So Greg would write it, Darren did music, Gen Z did art, and Logan did voiceover. And there's no sound here, but just the picture, just imagine some transistor music. So they worked on it off and on for like a month. And it forced them to get really specific. So Jen had to design the transistor, Red, and the antagonist environments. And Darren had to nail the musical tone. Greg had to land on the speaking voice style. And this was the first coherent, holistic expression of the world, the atmosphere, and the story. And if you've played Transistor and you watch this, it feels really spot on. And then the team was excited, yay! And the designers and engineers also had an easier time doing their job because now they had this story to work within where they had this idea of the weapon absorbing powers from people, and then that informed the design of the mechanics. And Greg just said, work just goes slowly if you don't know what you're building when you're building it. People really need to understand what they're making, and a trailer can show you where you're going even though you're not there yet. And also, if you have that trailer or mock-up, you can just always ask yourself, does this serve the goal? You could be experimenting with different mechanics and ideas, and if you have no particular goal, then of course you're probably going to end up in any which way if you're not being directed. And so as far as thinking of visuals and readability, I mean, there's so many ways you can go with this, but thinking of a trailer just forces you to think of visuals instead of just mechanics. So really simple example, if you're making a horror game, you could just look at a whole bunch of other horror games, look at their color palettes, and see how you might differentiate yours from what else is on the market. Or by the same tone, say you're making a thriller game, but not a horror game. Then if you have two visuals, you can decide, is this more horrific or is this more thriller-like, and then make your decisions accordingly. But if you don't have that shared vision, then it's harder to decide between those two sorts of things. Just another simple example of just designing for something to be watched versus played is this is for Walking Dead Season 1 and Firewatch. So the same people worked on the games. And the dialogue selection system in Firewatch was designed to be watched by other people because you can see when the little highlight thing hovers over, you can see what the player is deciding on. Or they might linger on should I choose this one? Maybe not. Whereas Walking Dead, when you have the face buttons, you have no idea what the player is thinking, what they're deciding between. So that's one small example of sort of designing for the audience, not player. Okay, so how do you make a trailer prototype? There's a bunch of different ways you can do it. And depending, you might need an artist, writer, composer, sound designer, video editor, programmer, designer. But so we have written description, mood boards or Rip-O-Matic, which I'll explain, animatic sketches and music, game prototype clips, and vertical slice. So the good news is the game doesn't have to be playable. So if you're doing a written description, here are the ingredients. Who is the player? What fantasy is this fulfilling? What is the mood and tone? What is the emotional experience? And what are the steps in the gameplay loop? Those are the basic ingredients. Now, if you want to get even more specific, what are the scenes of the trailer? And this is in order. This is just a template for making a trailer. Hooky opening shot, and I'll have another example of this too in different words. Introduction of the premise and mechanics, escalation and complications that arise, climactic moments, variety and scope, and then a fun ending, maybe. Or another way to describe it is call this genre hook content, which what I mean by that is beginning of your trailer, first 5 seconds, you need people to know what genre space you're in. Then for most of the trailer, you're showing why your game is different. And at the end, maybe if there's time, you can say, oh, 50 boss battles and skins and stuff like that. Whereas usually, a lot of indie game trailers start off with weapons and skins and environments. And I'm like, no, what? I don't even know what you're selling yet. So establish a genre, explain your hook, and then get to content if there's time. Because people can't care that there's a lot of your game until they know what the game is. So explain point by point. So what is the game genre? What opening shot would signal that? How is this game unique within that genre? Why is that interesting and or noteworthy? Because it could be just different, but not interesting. How does this game challenge me? And does this game have depth and longevity? So that's the template. Just follow that when you're making trailers. It's what I do. As far as I'm concerned, I make the exact same trailer over and over and over again. I've been doing it for the last 7 or 8 years. OK, so written description. This is just my mock-up idea for my talk. So imagine, opening shot, a cat trap is open. A cat takes the bait, and they get trapped. Introduction, voiceover. There are over 500,000 homeless cats in New York City. And then you're showing the player trapping cats, getting them neutered, releasing them, posting them on social media. Escalation, more difficult to capture cats. Full shelters, finding fosters, getting donations, and TNRing more cats. And then the climax, you get better shelters and facilities, more cities, more traps, cats and homes. Pro, very cheap, doesn't require a specific skill set. Con, no visuals. But good for brainstorming. OK, mood board, Rip-O-Matic. This is just like a collection of visuals that evoke a mood, vibe, setting, genre. Photos, movie stills, books, illustrations, color palettes, sound effects, music, voiceover, whatever you want. Bring it together, and then help people feel the idea of this game. So Rip-O-Matic is this film industry term where you just take a bunch of stuff from other sources. So this is actually a fan trailer from YouTube before the Obi-Wan Kenobi show came out. They just took this film where Ewan McGregor's in the desert, and they intercut it with shots of Star Wars and had some Star Wars music. But this is basically what a Rip-O-Matic is. And so the pros here are strong visuals, it's evocative, communicates the message in many ways, but it can require video editing skills, it can create unrealistic expectations, and it's hard to visualize gameplay because you're cobbling it together from a bunch of stuff. But I could easily see taking some things from other games, like a lever being pulled, and then a door opening in another one or something like that. So next is animatic, which this is like the transistor example. The pro is that it's bespoke and specific to the idea. And the con is that relies on art skills to make it look good and maybe having a composer or video editor. But you could just take the text description that you have and then turn them into scenes and make a piece. And so the next one is game prototype clips, where you're just making game assets to create the shots in the trailer. They don't have to function cohesively. They could just be little scenes that on their own, it worked just well enough that you could capture it and then put it into your editing software. It just has to look enough like gameplay to be captured. And so Daniel from Eastshade said that when they were making the trailer for Songs of Glimmerwick, they basically scripted out what they thought would make a good trailer, and then they made the requisite content and assets for those shots. And like I said, in some cases, they wrote entire new quests around the beats that they thought would make good trailer shots. So trailer design is really just designing mechanics which can concisely show in a trailer a shot that will interest people. And then the pro looks a lot more like the game. The game only has to work well enough. The con is a lot more people required and technical skills. And then last one is vertical slice. So this is the trailer for Soup Pot. They made the prototype with the trailer in mind. They thought, OK, what are the parts of the gameplay loop which need to be shown? And instead of doing gray box, they just used existing assets and spent about 2 weeks making it. This is not displaying oh no, that's fine. And actually it was playable. And so yeah, the pros can be played, much closer to the final vision of the game, but it's time and resource heavy. OK, so here's some prompts to help you structure your trailer. This is from Eka. When we announce the game, how do we want to do it? What do we want people to know? Which I use this slide from their title card because this is a really good copy for a trailer. Next is, if we have this mechanic, what will it look like in the trailer? And if that mechanic is not visible to the viewer, what changes will make it so? Okay, next one, what emotions should the viewer feel? And what does our audience want to see? Which this doesn't have to be like an existing fan base. It could just be a type of game player, like someone who likes roguelikes. What do they want to see in this new iteration? Next is, if you showed someone this trailer, would they think it's this genre and mood? And if not, what needs to be changed? So this is a screenshot from Dredge. So hopefully, when people see a trailer for Dredge, they feel like a foreboding presence and very sinister tone. And so this one here, this is a very common prompt in AAA, which is just describe 3 standout moments that would sell the theme and attraction of the game. Because people can't recite the entirety of a trailer normally, but they will probably remember a few standout moments. So this is from Half-Life Alyx, and like when that came out, a lot of the comments were like, "Oh my God, did you see the shotgun shells on the shelf?" And they pushed everything aside. As long as they had like one little thing in there that got them excited, that's great. So try to think of just a handful of things that would stand out. What would make someone at a trade show stop to look? It's from Lucas Pope. How do you express it to people in screenshots and generate interest? And similar vein, in a lineup of 100 games, could you pick it out from a screenshot or trailer? Which, make friends with really good art directors. Okay, so how do you check your work? Just show it to someone. Show or explain your idea to someone. You don't even have to ask for feedback. I get this all the time when I'm editing something. I'll just show someone an edit. They say nothing, but I instantly see like 5 things. I'm like, oh crap, that's terrible. This is too long. This is too short. This is paced weird. This part's not understandable, because your brain will just start seeing it through other people's eyes once you show it to people, which I'm sure you have experience with like playtesting. Are you and your team excited? Again, don't expect to be excited later. And there's just a few tips. Just make the trailer 90 seconds or shorter, because it just defeats the whole purpose if you make it really long. The whole point is to force you to think, how can I do this quickly, and does it communicate quickly? And Gwen from Sadal Studios / Chicon Club, she said, put a time limit on the project, because you can just get stuck making things pretty forever. So like I said, the team spent 2 weeks on this one. When I talked to Eka, he said that like 2 weeks to a month was about the amount of time they'd spend on an early trailer concept. And Gwen also said, just throw away everything you do. Get your point across and just be done with it, so that you don't get too precious about the tiny little details. And work with visual thinkers, filmmakers, and game trailer editors, people who are just wired to communicate ideas through images. And also use what works for you, because, so for example, Thirsty Suitors, like I said, it was kind of gameplay agnostic, so that could change around. Whereas Supergiant Games, Greg was saying that they're a very design-first studio, where the story emerges from the gameplay mechanics. So that's why Hades came to be, because the whole roguelike mechanic was conducive to the story that they want to tell with Hades. And that's my talk. Thank you for coming. You can see more of my terrible Firewatch trailer, which has everything you should not do in a trailer, starting with lots of logos that take a really long time to get through. I have like 1 minute. One question? I'll be outside after this, because actually you should come to my other talk, which is at 4:40 in this exact room. It's about making marketing timelines. I'm doing that with my friend Dana. OK, one question. Mic is off.
Please. OK, so I'm running a small indie team, like high school kids. How important is it getting a trailer up sooner rather than later, rather than just focusing on the mechanics of the game, for those that are just up and coming and learning how?
Is this the game you're selling? Sorry, the question was how important is it to get the trailer up rather than like working on mechanics?
Correct. For like a new team of developers.
And you're selling this game, or is this like a side project?
This is an actual game we're selling, yes.
OK. I mean, the sooner you get your store page up, the better, as long as your art style is locked down, and it's not going to change a whole lot. So very important.
Got it.
And yes, I'm sorry, that's not a very in-depth answer.
No, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
OK. All right, thank you so much. I'll be outside if you have more questions or anything.